What if you could live your life again? What if you got a second chance to fix every mistake, to avoid every heartbreak, to choose yourself for once? This is the story of Violet, who loved too deeply, gave too much, and lost everything, until fate gave her the gift she never knew she needed. Picture this: you're 18 again, sitting in that same classroom where it all began. But this time, you know exactly how the story ends. The question is, would you change it? Let me take you on a journey that will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, sacrifice, and second chances. Fape Chapter 20. The end that became a beginning. The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets of regret. Violet stood at the crosswalk, her 26th birthday forgotten in the chaos of her shattered heart. The fight with Aiden echoed in her mind, his cruel words cutting deeper than any physical wound. "It's just out of pity," he had sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "If you don't want to be with me, don't be so high sounding." 8 years. 8 years of her life dedicated to caring for a man who saw her devotion as nothing more than charity. 8 years of sleepless nights, of sacrificing her dreams, of pouring her soul into someone who could never see her worth. The truck's headlights pierced through the storm like the eyes of death itself. Time slowed to a crawl as Violet realized what was about to happen. This was it. This was how her story would end, alone, heartbroken, and forgotten. But as her soul lifted from her broken body, floating through the rain-soaked streets like a lost whisper, only one thought consumed her: she had to see him one last time. She had to make sure Aiden would be okay without her. The journey home felt like swimming through molasses, her spirit fighting against the pull of whatever came after death. Each raindrop seemed to slow her down, each gust of wind threatened to carry her away to the unknown. But love, even the twisted, unrequited love that had destroyed her, gave her strength. When she finally reached their apartment, the sight that greeted her shattered what remained of her heart into a million pieces. There was Aiden, sitting in his wheelchair by the window where she'd found him countless times before. But he wasn't alone. Serena was there, elegant and beautiful as always, her perfect face illuminated by the soft lamplight. And they were talking, laughing, sharing memories that didn't include Violet. "You know," Serena said, her voice like honey and poison mixed together, "I never understood what you saw in her. Violet always seemed so desperate." Aiden was quiet for a long moment. And Violet's ghostly heart clung to hope. Surely he would defend her. Surely after everything she'd done for him, he would speak up for the woman who'd given up everything to care for him. "Maybe," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you're right." The words hit Violet like physical blows. She wanted to scream, to rage, to make them see her floating there in their peripheral vision. But she was nothing now, less than a shadow, less than a memory. Then Serena leaned forward, her lips finding Aiden's in a kiss that lasted an eternity. And he didn't pull away, he didn't resist, he didn't even hesitate. Violet's spirit convulsed with a pain beyond anything physical death could offer. This was the man she'd nursed back from the brink of suicide. This was the man she'd fed when he refused to eat, bathed when he couldn't care for himself, held when nightmares consumed his sleep. This was the man she'd loved with every fiber of her being, and he was kissing another woman on the night she died. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Violet felt herself begin to dissolve. The rain outside seemed to wash through her very essence, and she welcomed the oblivion that beckoned. At least in nothingness, there would be no more pain, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Paffy Chapter 2a The Miracle of Return. The first thing Violet noticed was the absence of pain. No crushing weight on her chest, no sensation of drowning in her own blood, no cold seeping into her bones. Instead, there was warmth, and the familiar sound of teenage chatter filling her ears. "Oh my God, did you see him? He's even more gorgeous than the rumors said. I heard his family is loaded. Like, private jet to school loaded. Sasha from class 3 said he's single. Do you think he'd go for an underclassman?" Violet's eyes snapped open, expecting to see the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. Instead, she found herself staring at a ceiling she knew intimately, the water-stained tiles of classroom 2B at Riverside High School. The same classroom where she'd spent her senior year, stealing glances at the boy who would become her obsession. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sat up, looking around in bewilderment. There was Jenny, 18 years old again, her hair in the same ridiculous pigtails she'd worn before her mother convinced her to try a more mature style. There was Marcus, still skinny and awkward, years away from the growth spurt that would transform him into the heartthrob he'd become in college. And there was her desk, scratched and worn, with VL, plot AK, carved into the corner in tiny letters she'd spent hours perfecting when no one was looking. "This is impossible," she whispered, her voice cracking with disbelief. What's impossible? Asked Sunny, her deskmate, looking exactly as she had 8 years ago. Are you okay, Violet? You look like you've seen a ghost. A ghost. If only Sunny knew how accurate that assessment was. Violet touched her face, her hands, her arms, everything solid, everything real, everything exactly as it had been when she was 18. But her mind, her memories, her heart, they carried the weight of 8 additional years. 8 years of love and loss, sacrifice and betrayal, death and rebirth. I'm fine, she managed to say, though nothing about this situation was fine. Just tired. The classroom door burst open with a sound like thunder, cutting through the excited chatter like a knife. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned toward the entrance. Every breath was held in anticipation. Violet didn't need to look to know who had entered. She could feel his presence like electricity in the air. Could sense the shift in the room's energy as surely as she could feel her own heartbeat. But for the first time in either of her lives, she didn't look up. Everyone, settle down, called Mrs. Patterson, their homeroom teacher, her voice bright with the kind of enthusiasm she reserved for particularly exciting announcements. We have a new student joining us today. Please give him your full attention while he introduces himself. The silence stretched on, thick and expectant. Violet kept her eyes fixed on her textbook, even though the words blurred together meaninglessly. She could feel curious glances from her classmates, could sense their confusion at her apparent disinterest in the newcomer who had captured everyone else's attention. Well, Mrs. Patterson prompted gently. Don't be shy. Tell us a little about yourself. Still nothing. The quiet began to feel oppressive, weighted with tension Violet didn't fully understand. Finally, unable to resist, she raised her head just enough to steal a glance at the front of the classroom. And there he was. Aiden Cade, 18 years old and devastatingly beautiful. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows caught the golden highlights in his dark hair, creating an almost ethereal glow around his perfectly sculpted features. His uniform was immaculate, expensive, tailored to fit his lean frame like it had been designed specifically for him. Everything about him screamed wealth, privilege, and untouchable perfection. This was the boy who would grow up to break her heart. This was the man who would accept her love as his due while giving nothing in return. This was the person who would betray her memory before her body was even cold. But he was also achingly, impossibly beautiful. And as their eyes met across the crowded classroom, Violet felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the same sensation that had doomed her the first time around. Violet, he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered it. Rich and smooth, with just a hint of uncertainty that made him seem almost vulnerable. Violet Chen. The classroom erupted in whispers. How did the new student know Violet's name? Why was he staring at her like she was the only person in the room? What was the story behind that intense, almost desperate look in his eyes? Violet forced herself to maintain eye contact, even as her heart threatened to beat out of her chest. There was something in his gaze that she'd never seen before. Recognition, yes, but also confusion and a desperate kind of hope. It was the look of someone who'd been searching for something precious that they'd lost. Do you remember me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But in the dead silence of the classroom, every word carried clearly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Violet could feel the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on her. Could sense the collective held breath of her classmates as they waited for her response. This was the moment that had changed everything in her previous life. The moment she'd fallen completely and irreversibly in love with Aiden K. But this time was different. This time, she had 8 years of hindsight. This time, she knew exactly where this road led. Violet tilted her head slightly, letting a small, polite smile curve her lips. I'm sorry, she said clearly, making sure her voice carried to every corner of the room. Do we know each other? The effect was immediate and devastating. The light in Aiden's eyes dimmed as if someone had blown out a candle. His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked so lost and confused that Violet almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He started then stopped, clearly struggling to find words. I thought, never mind. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat, obviously uncomfortable with the strange tension that had filled her usually orderly classroom. Perhaps you could tell us your name and where you've transferred from. But Aiden wasn't listening to the teacher. His eyes remained fixed on Violet, searching her face for any sign of recognition, any hint that she was lying. She met his gaze steadily, maintaining her expression of polite confusion even as her heart ached with the effort. Aiden, he said finally, still looking at Violet. Aiden Cade. I transferred from St. Augustine Academy. A collective gasp went through the classroom. St. Augustine Academy was the most exclusive private school in the city. With tuition costs that exceeded most people's annual salaries, students who attended St. Augustine were destined for Ivy League universities and positions of power in their family businesses. They didn't transfer to public schools like Riverside High, not unless something had gone very, very wrong. "Well, Aiden," Mrs. Patterson said, consulting her seating chart. "You can take the seat behind Miss Chen. I'm sure she'd be happy to help you get oriented." Violet's stomach dropped as she heard footsteps approaching her desk. She kept her eyes fixed forward, but she could feel Aiden's presence behind her like heat from a fire. When he sat down, his chair scraped against the floor with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet classroom. "Violet," Sunny whispered urgently, leaning close to her desk. "Oh my God. Do you really not know him? Because he's looking at you like you hung the moon and stars." Violet shrugged, turning a page in her textbook with what she hoped looked like casual indifference. Must be a case of mistaken identity. But even as she said it, she could feel Aiden's stare burning into the back of her neck. For the rest of the class period, she was hyper, aware of his presence, the sound of his breathing, the rustle of papers, the soft scratch of his pen against notebook paper. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of homeroom, Violet practically jumped from her seat in her eagerness to escape. "Violet, wait!" Aiden's voice stopped her just as she reached the classroom door. She turned slowly, raising an eyebrow in polite inquiry. "Yes." He stood in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle, the kind that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Up close, she could see the fine details she'd memorized in her previous life, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. The way his eyes had flecks of gold mixed in with the brown. The perfect symmetry of his features that made him look like he'd been carved by a master sculptor. "I know this sounds crazy," he said, his voice low and urgent, "but I feel like we've met before. Not just met, like we've known each other for years. Like we've been through something important together." Violet's heart clenched at the raw honesty in his voice. This was new. In her previous life, their first meeting had been entirely different. He'd been confident then, slightly arrogant, secure in his position as the most desirable boy in school. This version of Aiden seemed vulnerable, almost desperate. "I'm sorry," she said gently, "but I think you have me confused with someone else. I would definitely remember meeting you." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. She would not make the same mistakes again. She would not throw away 8 years of her life on someone who could never love her the way she deserved. Aiden's face fell, but he didn't give up. Could we maybe talk sometime? I know it sounds weird, but I feel like there's something I need to tell you. Something important." "I'm pretty busy with school and work," Violet replied, already backing toward the door. "But maybe we'll have a chance to chat in class sometime." She escaped into the hallway before he could respond, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and regret. Behind her, she could hear Sunny calling her name, but she didn't stop. She needed air, space, time to process what had just happened. As she walked to her next class, Violet couldn't shake the image of Aiden's confused, hurt expression. It was clear that he remembered their previous life just as clearly as she did. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Pave Chapter 30. The weight of memory. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of familiar faces and remembered lessons. Violet found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, expecting to see Aiden following her, but he seemed to have taken her rejection to heart. She caught glimpses of him in the hallway between classes, always surrounded by curious classmates eager to befriend the mysterious new student, but he never approached her again. During lunch, Violet retreated to the library, a habit she developed in her previous life when the cafeteria became too overwhelming. She found a quiet corner table and spread out her textbooks. But the words on the pages might as well have been written in a foreign language. Her mind was too busy processing the impossibility of her situation to focus on anything as mundane as chemistry equations. Hiding from your new admirer, Violet looked up to find Leo Martinez standing beside her table, a gentle smile on his familiar face. In her previous life, she'd barely noticed Leo. He'd been just another classmate, background noise in her Aiden-obsessed world. But now, seeing him again, she was struck by how genuinely kind his eyes were, how his smile reached all the way to his eyes and made her feel warm instead of nervous. "I'm not hiding," she said, closing her chemistry book and gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Just studying. Want to join me?" Leo's face lit up with surprised pleasure. "Really? I mean, yes, absolutely. I was hoping we could catch up. It's been forever since we really talked." As he settled into the chair across from her, Violet realized that Leo was right. In her previous life, they'd known each other since childhood. Their mothers were best friends, and they'd spent countless summer days playing together when they were kids. But once high school started and Violet became obsessed with Aiden, she'd gradually drifted away from Leo and all her other childhood friends. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I've been a terrible friend lately. I got so caught up in other things that I forgot what was really important." Leo looked surprised by her sudden confession. "Hey, it's okay. We're teenagers. We're supposed to make stupid mistakes and figure things out as we go. Besides," he added with a grin, "you're talking to me now, aren't you?" They spent the rest of lunch period catching up, and Violet was amazed by how easy it was to talk to Leo. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh with stories about his part-time job at his uncle's auto repair shop. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Violet felt lighter than she had all day. "Same time tomorrow?" Leo asked as they gathered their things. "Definitely," Violet replied, meaning it completely. As she walked to her afternoon classes, Violet reflected on how different this conversation with Leo had been compared to her interactions with Aiden. With Leo, she felt comfortable being herself. No need to perform or impress. No anxiety about saying the wrong thing. With Aiden, even in this second life, she felt like she was walking on eggshells, hyper-aware of every word and gesture. Maybe that was the real difference between healthy attraction and obsession. With Leo, she felt like an equal. With Aiden, she'd always felt like she was auditioning for a role she'd never quite be perfect enough to land. The afternoon brought its own challenges. In English class, she found herself seated 2 rows behind Aiden, giving her an unwanted view of the back of his head. She could see him turning around periodically, clearly looking for her, and each time their eyes met, his expression grew more confused and desperate. During the poetry unit discussion, Mrs. Rodriguez called on students to share their thoughts about unrequited love in Shakespeare's sonnets. When Aiden's hand shot up, Violet's stomach dropped. "Love isn't always about getting what you want," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the classroom. "Sometimes the most powerful love is the kind that exists even when it's not returned. The kind that makes you want to be better, even if the other person never sees your efforts." Several students nodded thoughtfully, but Violet felt sick. Was he talking about their previous life? Was this his way of sending her a message? "That's an interesting perspective, Mr. Cade," Mrs. Rodriguez replied. "But don't you think that kind of love can become unhealthy? When does devotion cross the line into obsession?" Aiden was quiet for a long moment, and Violet could see his shoulders tense. I think the line gets crossed when you stop seeing the other person as a real individual with their own needs and wants. When you start treating them like a prize to be won instead of a person to be cherished." The honesty in his voice made Violet's chest tight. This was not the Aiden she remembered from her previous life. That Aiden had never shown this level of self-awareness or emotional maturity. But then again, in her previous life, he'd never had to question his own behavior. He'd never been rejected, never been forced to examine his own motivations. After class, Violet hurried toward the exit, but Aiden caught up with her in the hallway. "Violet, please," he said, falling into step beside her. "I know you said you don't remember me, but could we start over? Could we try being friends?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the afternoon light streaming through the hallway windows, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable than the confident boy she remembered. There were dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't been sleeping well. "Why?" she asked. "Why is it so important to you?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from countless moments in their previous life when he was frustrated or uncertain. "Because I feel like I've been searching for something my whole life, and when I saw you today, it was like finding the missing piece of myself." "I know that probably sounds crazy, but it does sound crazy," Violet interrupted gently. "And I'm not looking for someone to complete me, Aiden. I'm trying to figure out who I am on my own." The rejection hit him visibly. His face crumpled for just a moment before he managed to compose himself. "Right. Of course. I'm sorry for bothering you." As he walked away, Violet felt a familiar pang of guilt. The urge to chase after him, to apologize, to make him feel better was almost overwhelming. But she forced herself to stay put. This was exactly the pattern that had destroyed her previous life, prioritizing his feelings over her own well-being. She would not make that mistake again. Pocket Chapter 40 The Art of Letting Go. The next few weeks settled into a routine that felt both familiar and strange. Violet threw herself into her studies with an intensity that surprised her teachers and classmates. Without the constant distraction of unrequited love, her grades improved dramatically. She joined the art club, something she'd always wanted to do, but never had time for in her previous life, and discovered a genuine talent for painting. Leo became a regular part of her daily routine. They met for lunch in the library, studied together after school, and spent weekend afternoons exploring the city. For the first time in either of her lives, Violet felt like she had a true friend. Someone who valued her company for its own sake. Not because they wanted something from her. "You seem different lately," her mother observed during one of their weekly phone calls. "Happier. More yourself, if that makes sense." "It makes perfect sense," Violet replied, curled up in her dorm room with a cup of tea. She'd convinced her aunt and uncle to let her move into the school dormitory, claiming she needed a quiet place to study. In reality, she just couldn't bear to live in their house again, enduring her cousin Ryan's bullying and her aunt's passive, aggressive comments. "I've made some good friends," she continued, "and I'm finally focusing on the things that matter to me." "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," her mother said, and Violet could hear the smile in her voice. "You sound like you're really finding your path." If only her mother knew how literally true that statement was. Aiden, meanwhile, seemed to be struggling with her continued rejection. Violet watched from a distance as he threw himself into gaining her attention through increasingly elaborate gestures. He brought her coffee every morning, left carefully folded notes in her locker, and volunteered to be her lab partner in chemistry class. Each overture was politely but firmly declined. "You're being really cruel to that boy," Sunny said one afternoon as they watched Aiden walk away after Violet had refused his offer to carry her books. "He's clearly head over heels for you, and you're treating him like he doesn't exist." "I'm not treating him badly," Violet replied calmly. "I'm just not interested in a relationship with him." "That's not cruel, that's honest." "But why not? He's gorgeous, he's rich, he's smart, and he's completely devoted to you. What more could you want?" Violet paused in organizing her locker, considering how to answer. How could she explain that devotion without respect was worthless? That she'd already lived through this particular fairy tale and knew it ended in heartbreak. "I want someone who sees me as an equal," she said finally. "Not someone who puts me on a pedestal or treats me like a prize to be won. I want a partnership, not worship." Sunny looked confused. "But isn't it romantic when a guy is willing to do anything for you?" "No," Violet said firmly. "It's not romantic when someone refuses to accept your clearly stated boundaries. It's not romantic when someone tries to wear down your resistance instead of respecting your choices. Real love means caring about what the other person wants, even when it's not what you want to hear." As if summoned by their conversation, Aiden appeared at Violet's locker. He looked tired, and there was a desperate edge to his usual polished appearance. "Violet," he said, "could I talk to you privately for a minute?" Sunny took the hint and disappeared with a meaningful look at Violet. Alone with Aiden, Violet could feel the intensity radiating from him like heat. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About not looking for someone to complete you. And you're right. I realize I've been approaching this all wrong." Violet closed her locker and turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've been so focused on convincing you to give me a chance that I never stopped to think about what you actually want. I've been selfish, and I'm sorry." The apology was unexpected, and for a moment Violet felt her resolve waver. This level of self-reflection was definitely new. In her previous life, Aiden had never shown this kind of emotional maturity. "I appreciate the apology," she said carefully, "but that doesn't change anything between us." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm asking you to let me prove that I can be better. Not for you, but for myself. I want to be the kind of person who deserves someone like you, even if that someone ends up being someone else entirely." Violet studied his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or false sincerity. But what she saw there was genuine remorse and a determination that reminded her of the boy he might have been if circumstances had been different. "Okay," she said finally, "but I have conditions." Hope flared in his eyes. "Anything, no more gifts, no more romantic gestures, no more trying to insert yourself into my life without permission. If you want to prove you've changed, show me by respecting my boundaries." "Don't," he said immediately. "Anything else, yes. Stop making this about me. If you really want to grow as a person, do it because you want to be better, not because you think it will win me over. Focus on becoming someone you can respect, not someone you think I might love." Aiden nodded solemnly. "You're right. You're absolutely right." He paused, then added quietly, "You know, in another life, I think we could have been really good for each other." Violet's breath caught. There it was, confirmation that he definitely remembered their previous timeline. Maybe, she said softly, but this isn't another life. This is this life, and in this life, we're different people making different choices. I understand, he said. And for what it's worth, I think the choices you're making are braver than anything I ever did. As he walked away, Violet felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of her was proud of him for finally showing some emotional growth. Part of her was sad for what they'd lost, or perhaps what they'd never really had in the first place, and part of her was relieved to finally have some closure on this chapter of her story. Pocket Chapter 7. New Foundations. Spring arrived with a burst of cherry blossoms and the promise of new beginnings. Violet's 18th birthday came and went quietly, marked by a small celebration with Leo and a few friends from art club. It was nothing like the elaborate party her aunt had thrown for her cousin Ryan, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Make a wish, Leo said, lighting the candles on the small cake they'd bought from the bakery near school. Violet closed her eyes and thought about what she wanted most in this second life. In her previous timeline, all her wishes had centered around Aiden, for him to notice her, to love her, to need her. Now, she wished for something entirely different. I wish for the courage to keep choosing myself, she whispered, then blew out the candles in one breath. Good wish, Leo asked, cutting her a slice of chocolate cake. The best, she replied, meaning it completely. As promised, Aiden had backed off considerably. He no longer approached her with romantic overtures, though she still caught him watching her sometimes with an expression of deep regret. He'd also seemed to take her advice about self-improvement to heart. She'd heard from classmates that he'd started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, and had begun seeing the school counselor to work through some personal issues. The change was noticeable. The arrogant, entitled boy she remembered from her previous life was slowly being replaced by someone more thoughtful, more aware of his own flaws and privileges. It was the kind of growth she'd hoped for him all along, even if it had come too late for them. You know, he's been asking about you, Sunny mentioned one day as they walked home from school together. Who? Violet asked, though she suspected she knew. Aiden. He keeps asking Leo about your interests, your goals, what makes you happy. But not in a creepy way, she added quickly. More like he's trying to understand who you really are as a person. Violet felt a pang of something, not quite regret, but a kind of wistful sadness. That's nice, she said simply. Is it weird that he's finally becoming the kind of guy you might actually want to date, just when you've decided you don't want to date him? Not weird, Violet replied thoughtfully. Just too late. Some things can't be undone, and some opportunities can't be reclaimed. That doesn't make them less valuable. It just makes them part of a different story. As if summoned by their conversation, they spotted Aiden up ahead, but he wasn't alone. Serena stood beside him, gesticulating wildly as she spoke. Even from a distance, Violet could see the tension in Aiden's posture, the way he kept trying to step away from Serena's increasingly aggressive proximity. Looks like drama, Sunny observed with interest. Violet slowed her pace, not wanting to get drawn into whatever confrontation was unfolding. But as they got closer, Serena's voice became audible, and what she heard made her blood boil. Completely embarrassing yourself over some nobody, Serena was saying, her usually sweet voice sharp with anger. Your parents sent you to this school to teach you humility, not to throw yourself at the first plain girl who showed you some attention. Serena, stop, Aiden said firmly. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I've known you since we were children, Aiden. I know when you're being ridiculous. This obsession with that charity case, it's beneath you. Violet felt Leo tense beside her. Want me to handle this? He murmured. But before Violet could respond, Aiden's voice cut through the air like a whip. Don't. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it that Violet had never heard before. Don't you ever talk about Violet that way again. Oh please? Serena scoffed. What are you going to do? Defend your unrequited crush. Everyone knows she wants nothing to do with you. You're right, Aiden said, and Violet was surprised by the calm acceptance in his voice. She doesn't want anything to do with me. And you know what? That's her choice to make. I respect that choice even if it hurts. This is pathetic, Serena snapped. The Aiden I knew would never humiliate himself like this over some. The Aiden you knew was selfish and entitled. He interrupted. He thought he deserved things just because he wanted them. He treated people like possessions instead of human beings. If that's the version of me you prefer, then maybe we shouldn't be friends anymore. Serena's face went white with shock. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Aiden replied. I'm trying to become a better person, Serena. Someone who respects other people's boundaries and choices. Someone who understands that love isn't about what you can get from someone, but what you can give to them. And right now, the best thing I can give Violet is my absence. With that, he walked away, leaving Serena standing alone on the sidewalk, looking stunned. Violet stood frozen, processing what she'd just witnessed. In her previous life, Aiden had never defended her like that. He'd never chosen her over Serena, never put her feelings above his own desires. The growth was real and it was profound. While Leo said softly, "That was unexpected." "Yeah," Violet agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It really was." Fafi Chapter 60. The space between heartbeats. The incident with Serena became a turning point. Though not in the way Violet might have expected. Instead of making Aiden's transformation feel like a manipulation tactic designed to win her over, it proved that his change was genuine and internal. He wasn't becoming a better person for her. He was becoming a better person for himself, and that made all the difference. Over the following weeks, Violet found herself observing Aiden from a distance, not with the desperate longing of her previous life, but with a kind of anthropological curiosity. It was fascinating to watch someone actively work to dismantle their own toxic patterns and rebuild themselves from the ground up. He'd stopped trying to get her attention entirely, which paradoxically made him more noticeable to her. She saw him in the hallways helping younger students with their books, heard from teachers about his thoughtful contributions to class discussions, learned from classmates about his volunteer work at the shelter. He was becoming the kind of person she might have been able to love in a healthy way if they'd met under different circumstances. But they hadn't met under different circumstances. They'd met in a context of obsession and unequal power dynamics, and some things couldn't be undone, no matter how much growth occurred afterward. "You know what I think," Leo said one afternoon as they sat by the lake near school, working on homework assignments. "What's that?" Violet asked, looking up from her history textbook. "I think you're the strongest person I know." The comment caught Violet off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean you see right through all the superficial stuff that impresses everyone else. Aiden is objectively everything most girls our age think they want. He's handsome, wealthy, mysterious, and completely devoted to you. But you see past all that to what really matters. You see that devotion without respect is worthless, that attraction without compatibility is shallow, that someone's potential doesn't matter if they're not ready to be the person you need them to be." Leo paused, skipping a stone across the lake's surface. Most people would have given in by now. Most people would have convinced themselves that his growth was enough to erase the past. But you know your own worth, and you refuse to settle for less than you deserve. That takes incredible strength. Violet felt tears prick at her eyes. In her previous life, no one had ever acknowledged her strength. Everyone had seen her devotion to Aiden as romantic, noble, proof of her capacity for love. No one had recognized it for what it really was, a slow form of self-destruction disguised as virtue. "Thank you," she said softly. That means more to me than you know." "Good," Leo replied with a gentle smile. "Because I think you need to hear it more often. You're worth celebrating, Violet. Not for what you can do for other people, but for who you are." As spring turned to summer, the end of their senior year approached with all the bittersweet intensity that major life transitions bring. College acceptance letters arrived, and Violet was thrilled to learn she'd been accepted to her dream university with a partial scholarship. Her grades, boosted by her newfound focus, had opened doors she'd never thought possible. Leo had also been accepted to the same university, though in a different program. The idea of continuing their friendship into this next phase of life filled Violet with a warm sense of anticipation. "We should celebrate," Leo suggested when they compared their acceptance letters. "Just the two of us. Somewhere special." They decided on the art museum downtown, a place Violet had always wanted to visit but never had time for in her previous life. As they wandered through the galleries, discussing the paintings and sculptures, Violet felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. This was what happiness felt like when it wasn't tangled up with anxiety and longing. This was what it meant to enjoy someone's company, without constantly worrying about whether you were saying the right thing, or being interesting enough. "I have something to tell you," Leo said as they sat on a bench in front of a particularly stunning landscape painting. Violet turned to face him, noting the slight nervousness in his expression. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about this for a while, and I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but with graduation coming up and everything changing." He took a deep breath. "I have feelings for you, Violet. More than friendship feelings." Violet's heart skipped, but not with the frantic butterfly sensation she remembered from her interactions with Aiden. This was different, warmer, steadier, like coming home after a long journey. I know you might not feel the same way. Leo continued quickly. And that's okay. I don't want to pressure you or make things weird between us. But I also didn't want to go to college wondering, what if, you know. Violet studied his face, the earnest brown eyes, the slightly crooked smile. The way he was trying so hard to be brave despite his obvious nervousness. This was what real love looked like, she realized. Not the desperate, consuming obsession she'd felt for Aiden, but this steady, comfortable affection that made her feel valued and safe. She started, then stopped, considering her words carefully. I care about you too, Leo. More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time. But I need to be honest with you about something. His expression grew concerned. What is it? I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I've been through some things that changed me pretty fundamentally. I'm still figuring out who I am and what I want from life. If we're going to explore this, whatever this is between us, I need to know that you're okay with that uncertainty. Leo reached over and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Violet, I've been watching you grow and change all year. I've seen you become more confident, more sure of yourself, more willing to stand up for what you believe in. Whatever you've been through, it's made you stronger, and I admire that. He squeezed her hand gently. I don't need you to have everything figured out. I just need you to be honest with me about where you are and what you need. We can figure out the rest together. Violet felt something tight and guarded in her chest begin to relax. Okay, she said softly. I'd like that. Their first kiss happened right there in the museum, soft and sweet and absolutely nothing like the desperate, hungry kisses she'd shared with Aiden in her previous life. This kiss tasted like hope and new beginnings, like the promise of a love built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. When they broke apart, Violet was smiling. So, she said, I guess we're dating now. If you want to be, Leo replied, his own smile bright enough to rival the afternoon sunlight streaming through the museum skylights. I want to be. Violet confirmed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Fa-Fei Chapter 7 Day. The weight of watching graduation day arrived with typical June humidity, and the kind of nervous excitement that comes with major life transitions. Violet sat with her classmates in the school auditorium, wearing her cap and gown, listening to the principal's speech about pursuing dreams and making a difference in the world. From her seat in the middle of the alphabetically arranged rows, she had a clear view of Aiden, who sat several rows ahead of her. He looked composed and handsome in his graduation attire. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing around the auditorium as if searching for someone. When her name was called to receive her diploma, Violet walked across the stage with confidence, accepting her certificate and the congratulations of her teachers. The applause from the audience was warm and genuine, and she spotted Leo in the crowd, cheering enthusiastically along with her mother, who had driven down for the ceremony. As she returned to her seat, Violet caught Aiden's eye. He was watching her with an expression of such profound sadness and regret that it took her breath away. For just a moment, she saw past his composed exterior to the lonely, confused boy underneath, the one who was finally beginning to understand what he'd lost, and how much of that loss was his own doing. She gave him a small, kind smile, not the desperate, hopeful expression of her previous life, but something warmer and more mature. A smile that said, I wish you well, even though we can't be together. A smile that acknowledged their shared history while accepting their separate futures. Aiden's face crumpled with relief and gratitude, and he mouthed, thank you, before turning back to face the stage. After the ceremony, Violet was surrounded by friends and family offering congratulations and taking photos. Her mother was beaming with pride, and Leo's parents had joined them, making the whole gathering feel like a real celebration of her achievements. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, her mother said, pulling her into a tight hug. You've grown into such a remarkable young woman. Thanks, Mom. Violet replied, feeling tears of joy prick at her eyes. I couldn't have done it without your support. As they posed for photos, Violet noticed Aiden standing alone near the edge of the crowd. His parents hadn't come to his graduation, too busy with their business empire to attend their son's milestone moment. Serena was nowhere to be seen, having transferred to a different school after their confrontation months earlier. For a moment, Violet felt a familiar pang of sympathy. No one should have to celebrate such an important day alone. But then Leo appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist, and she remembered that Aiden's loneliness was not her responsibility to fix. Ready to get out of here? Leo asked quietly. I know a great little cafe where we can properly celebrate. More than ready, Violet replied, allowing herself to be led away from the crowd and toward their new future. As they walked toward Leo's car, Violet felt a sense of completion wash over her. She'd successfully navigated the dangerous waters of her senior year, avoiding the mistakes that had destroyed her previous life while building something beautiful and healthy in their place. She'd learned to value herself, to set boundaries, to choose partners who saw her as an equal rather than a prize to be won. Most importantly, she'd learned that love didn't have to hurt, that the right person wouldn't make her feel like she had to earn their affection or prove her worth every day, that healthy relationships were built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility, not on dramatic gestures and emotional manipulation. Pabe Chapter 80. College and New Horizons. University life brought freedoms Violet had never experienced in either of her lives. Away from the familiar pressures and expectations of home, she threw herself into her studies with passion and curiosity. Her major in fine arts with a minor in psychology felt like the perfect combination of creative expression and understanding human nature, two things that had become incredibly important to her after everything she'd experienced. Leo was thriving as well, pursuing his degree in environmental engineering with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else in his life. They saw each other regularly but maintained their own separate friend groups and interests, creating a healthy balance between togetherness and independence. "I love that we can be together without losing ourselves," Violet told him one evening as they studied together in the library. In past relationships I've heard about, people seem to disappear into each other. This feels so much healthier. That's because we both came into this relationship as complete people," Leo replied, looking up from his textbook. "We're choosing to share our lives, not depending on each other to fill some kind of void." The wisdom in his words struck Violet deeply. That had been the fundamental flaw in her relationship with Aiden. She'd been trying to complete herself through him, while he'd been trying to use her devotion to heal his own emotional wounds. Neither of them had been whole enough to build something healthy together. News from home filtered in through social media and occasional phone calls. Aiden had been accepted to a prestigious university on the East Coast, where he was reportedly doing well in his pre-law program. Photos from mutual friends showed him looking healthier, more at peace with himself. He'd apparently continued his volunteer work and had even started a nonprofit organization focused on helping disadvantaged youth access educational opportunities. He's become quite the philanthropist. Sunny reported during one of their video calls. "It's like he's a completely different person from the spoiled rich boy who transferred to our school." "People can change," Violet replied diplomatically. "I'm glad he's finding his way." And she meant it. Seeing Aiden grow into a better version of himself brought her no jealousy or regret, only a kind of peaceful satisfaction. She'd planted seeds of self-reflection during their interactions in high school, and now he was growing in ways that would serve him and others well. Their story might not have had a romantic ending, but it had contributed to both of their personal development in meaningful ways. The real test of Violet's growth came during her sophomore year, when she received an unexpected visitor. She was in her dorm room, working on a painting for her advanced studio class, when her roommate announced that someone was there to see her. Violet assumed it was Leo, coming to walk her to dinner as they often did, but when she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Serena. The other girl looked older, more sophisticated than she had in high school, but there was something brittle about her perfectly styled appearance. Her smile was sharp around the edges, and her eyes held a calculating quality that made Violet immediately wary. "Violet," Serena said with artificial sweetness, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I was in the area and thought it would be nice to catch up." "Of course," Violet replied politely, though every instinct told her this visit was anything but casual. "Would you like to come in?" Serena's gaze swept over Violet's dorm room, taking in the art supplies scattered across the desk, the photographs of Violet and Leo on the bulletin board, the general atmosphere of creative productivity and happiness. "You've done well for yourself," Serena observed, settling into the desk chair with practiced elegance. "I heard you're dating that boy from high school, Leo. Was it?" "We are," Violet confirmed, remaining standing near the door. Something about Serena's presence made her want to maintain an easy escape route. "How quaint," Serena said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose he's very devoted to you. Men like that usually are grateful for any attention from someone out of their league." The barb was delivered with such casual cruelty that it took Violet a moment to process the insult. In her previous life, comments like that would have devastated her, confirming all her worst fears about her own inadequacy. Now, they just made her feel sorry for Serena. Actually, Violet said calmly, Leo and I are equals in our relationship. Neither of us feels grateful or unworthy. We both bring value to the partnership. Serena's smile faltered slightly. How nice for you. I suppose settling for comfortable is easier than pursuing something more challenging. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss? Violet asked, tired of the verbal sparring. Serena's mask slipped entirely, revealing the anger underneath. I want to know what you did to Aiden. I'm sorry. Don't play innocent with me. Serena snapped. Aiden and I have known each other since childhood. We were meant to be together, everyone knew it. But ever since he became obsessed with you in high school, he's been completely different. Distant, focused on all these ridiculous charitable projects, talking about personal growth and emotional maturity, like some kind of self-help guru. Violet blinked in surprise. You're upset because Aiden became more charitable and emotionally mature. I'm upset because he's not the same person I fell in love with. Serena's voice rose, and Violet was grateful that her roommate had left for dinner. He used to be confident, decisive, powerful. Now he guesses everything, asks my opinion instead of just taking charge, talks about feelings constantly. It's like you infected him with some kind of weakness. The accusation was so absurd that Violet almost laughed. Serena, what you're describing isn't weakness. It's growth. It's someone learning to be a better partner and a better person. It's not what I want. Serena exploded. I want the old Aiden back. The one who knew what he wanted and took it. The one who didn't constantly analyze everything to death. In that moment, Violet understood something crucial about Serena that she'd never seen before. The other girl didn't actually love Aiden, she loved the idea of him. She loved his wealth, his confidence. His willingness to make decisions without considering other people's feelings. She loved the power that came with being chosen by someone like that. But the moment Aiden started treating her as an equal, started asking for her input instead of just expecting her compliance, he'd become less attractive to her. She didn't want a partner, she wanted a benevolent dictator who happened to find her appealing. I think, Violet said gently, that maybe you and Aiden want different things from a relationship. And that's okay, it just means you're not compatible. We're perfectly compatible. Serena insisted. We always have been, it's just that you changed him somehow. Made him think he needed to be someone different. No one can change another person. Violet replied firmly. People can only change themselves, and only when they're ready to do the work. If Aiden is different now, it's because he chose to be different. Serena stared at her for a long moment, clearly struggling with this concept. Finally she stood up, smoothing down her designer skirt with sharp, agitated movements. Well, she said, her voice returning to its artificially sweet tone, I suppose some people are satisfied with inspiring mediocrity. I hope you and your comfortable relationship bring you all the happiness you deserve. With that parting shot, she swept out of the room, leaving Violet alone with her thoughts. As Violet returned to her painting, she reflected on the conversation with a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for Serena, who was so trapped in her own ideas about love and power that she couldn't see the beauty in genuine emotional growth. Relief that she herself had escaped that mindset, that toxic way of viewing relationships as competitions to be won rather than partnerships to be nurtured. Her phone buzzed with a text from Leo. Dinner in 10. I have something exciting to tell you. Violet smiled, gathering her jacket and keys. Whatever Leo's news was, she knew he'd share it with enthusiasm and joy. Expecting nothing from her, but genuine interest and support. That was what love looked like when it was healthy, a mutual exchange of care and celebration. Not a desperate attempt to possess or control another person. As she walked across campus to meet Leo, Violet felt grateful for every experience that had led her to this moment. The pain of her previous life, the confusion of her rebirth, the difficult choices she'd made in high school, all of it had been necessary to bring her to this place of peace and authentic happiness. She'd learned that second chances weren't just about avoiding past mistakes. They were about having the wisdom to recognize what you truly wanted and the courage to pursue it, even when it looked different from what everyone else expected. Most importantly, she'd learned that the greatest love story wasn't about finding someone to complete you. It was about becoming complete yourself. And then choosing to share that wholeness with someone who had done the same. Fafe Chapter 9e, The Art of Forgiveness. Junior year brought new challenges and opportunities. Violet's art was gaining recognition both on campus and in local galleries, with several of her pieces being selected for a prestigious student exhibition. Her relationship with Leo had deepened into something solid and enduring, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine compatibility that grew stronger with each passing month. It was during the opening night of her art exhibition that Violet received another surprise from her past. She was standing near her favorite piece, a large canvas depicting a woman walking away from a storm toward a sunrise, discussing the symbolism with a potential buyer, when she noticed a familiar figure across the gallery. Aiden stood near the entrance, wearing a well-tailored suit that spoke of continued wealth and success. But it was his demeanor that struck Violet most forcefully. Gone was the desperate, entitled boy she remembered from high school. In his place stood a man who carried himself with quiet confidence, someone who had learned to be comfortable in his own skin without needing external validation. Their eyes met across the crowded gallery, and Aiden offered a small, respectful nod of acknowledgement. He didn't approach her immediately, instead taking time to genuinely examine the artwork on display. Violet watched as he moved through the exhibition, studying each piece with careful attention, occasionally making notes in a small notebook he carried. When he finally approached her, it was with the polite deference of someone who understood boundaries and respected them completely. "Congratulations," he said simply. "Your work is extraordinary. Truly moving." "Thank you," Violet replied, studying his face for any sign of ulterior motives. "I didn't expect to see you here. I'm in town for a conference," Aiden explained. "Legal aid reform advocacy. When I saw the exhibition announcement online and recognized your name, He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I wanted to see what you'd created. Art has always been your passion, even back in high school." The observation surprised Violet. In her previous life, Aiden had never shown any awareness of her interests or dreams beyond how they related to him. "You remembered that." "I remember a lot of things I wish I'd paid more attention to at the time," Aiden said with a rueful smile. "Including the fact that you deserved someone who saw you as more than just a reflection of their own needs." Before Violet could respond, Leo appeared at her side, carrying 2 glasses of wine from the reception table. He smiled warmly at Aiden, extending his hand in greeting. "You must be Aiden," Leo said with genuine friendliness. "I'm Leo. Violet's mentioned you before." Aiden shook Leo's hand, and Violet was struck by the lack of tension or competition in the gesture. Whatever jealousy or possessiveness Aiden might have felt in high school had been replaced by something much healthier. "All good things, I hope," Aiden replied with self-deprecating humor. "Though I suspect I have some ground to make up for in that regard." "Actually," Leo said, surprising both Violet and Aiden. "She's told me about how much you've grown since high school. It sounds like you've done some impressive work on yourself." Aiden looked genuinely moved by the comment. "That's very generous of her to say. More generous than I probably deserve. Growth is always worth acknowledging," Violet said softly. "It takes courage to examine yourself honestly and make changes." "It does," Aiden agreed. "And I owe you an apology, Violet. A real one. Not the desperate pleading I subjected you to in high school." He took a deep breath, his expression becoming serious and earnest. "I was selfish and entitled back then. I treated your feelings like they were less important than mine. And I tried to manipulate you into giving me what I wanted instead of respecting what you needed. I'm sorry for putting you in that position, and I'm sorry for all the ways I made your life more difficult." The apology was everything Violet had never received in her previous life, genuine, specific, and focused on her experience rather than his own guilt or desire for forgiveness. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot. I don't expect forgiveness," Aiden continued. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see then. That you were never the problem. My inability to handle rejection gracefully, my sense of entitlement, my refusal to see you as an autonomous person with your own needs and desires, that was all on me." Leo squeezed Violet's hand gently, a silent show of support, and she felt a wave of gratitude for his presence. Having him there, solid and reassuring, made this conversation feel manageable in a way it might not have otherwise. "I'm glad you found your way," Violet said to Aiden. "The work you're doing sounds meaningful." "It is," Aiden replied, his face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "Working with kids who've aged out of the foster system, helping them access legal aid and educational opportunities. It's shown me what real purpose feels like, helping people because they deserve help, not because I want something from them in return." "That's beautiful," Leo said, and Violet could tell he meant it. The world needs more people willing to do that kind of work. They chatted for a few more minutes about Aiden's nonprofit work and Violet's artistic aspirations. The conversation was pleasant, comfortable even, lacking any of the tension or underlying drama that had characterized their interactions in high school. When Aiden excused himself to let them return to their other guests, he paused at the gallery entrance and looked back at them. Violet saw him take in the sight of her and Leo together, comfortable, happy, genuinely connected, and smile with what looked like authentic happiness for her. That went better than I expected, Leo observed as they watched Aiden disappear into the evening crowd outside the gallery. Much better, Violet agreed. He's really changed, fundamentally changed. Do you regret not giving him another chance? Leo asked gently. Now that you can see who he's become. Violet considered the question seriously. No, she said finally. Because the person he is now, that growth, that self-awareness, that commitment to being better, those things came from being rejected. They came from having to confront his own flaws and work on them independently, without the safety net of someone else's unconditional love. She turned to face Leo fully, taking his hands in hers. If I'd given in to his pursuit in high school, he might never have been motivated to do that work, and I definitely wouldn't have learned to value myself enough to build something healthy with you. So everything worked out the way it was supposed to, Leo said, bringing her hands to his lips for a gentle kiss. Everything worked out exactly the way it needed to, Violet confirmed. As the evening wound down and they helped clean up the gallery, Violet reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. In her previous life, she'd died believing that love meant sacrifice, that devotion required self-erasure, that she was only valuable insofar as she could serve someone else's needs. Now she understood that real love was about choosing each other as equals, supporting each other's growth, without trying to control it, and building something together that was greater than the sum of its parts. The exhibition had been a success in multiple ways, several pieces had sold, important connections had been made for her artistic career, and she'd received closure on a chapter of her life that had defined her for too long. Most importantly, she'd been able to forgive Aiden, not because he'd earned it or deserved it, but because holding on to resentment would have only hurt her. Forgiveness, she'd learned, wasn't about excusing someone else's behavior. It was about freeing yourself from the weight of past pain so you could move forward unencumbered. Kopke Chapter Hunte. Full circle senior year arrived with all the bittersweet intensity of endings and new beginnings. Violet was preparing for graduate school applications, having decided to pursue her MFA in fine arts with the eventual goal of becoming a professor. Leo was planning to join an environmental consulting firm after graduation, with dreams of starting his own sustainable development company someday. Their relationship had weathered the normal challenges of college life, stress, distance during internships, the pressure of figuring out their post-graduation plans, and emerged stronger for having navigated those obstacles together. I have something for you, Leo said one evening as they sat in their favorite spot by the lake on campus. The cherry blossoms were blooming again, marking the fourth spring Violet had experienced since her rebirth. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Violet's heart skipped. But again, not with anxiety or desperation. This skip was pure joy, anticipation for whatever beautiful moment was about to unfold. Before you panic, Leo said with a nervous laugh, this isn't a proposal. We're way too young for that, and we both have too much growing left to do. But he opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small but perfect sapphire. This is a promise, he continued. A promise that when we're both ready, when we've finished school, started our careers, become the people we're meant to be, I want to revisit this conversation. I want to build a life with you, Violet. Not because I need you to complete me, but because I can't imagine wanting to share my adventures with anyone else. The tears of happiness blurred Violet's vision as she looked at the ring, then at Leo's earnest, hopeful face. This was what healthy love looked like: patient, respectful, built on genuine partnership rather than desperate need. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, I want that too. All of it. As Leo slipped the ring onto her finger, Violet thought about the girl she'd been in her previous life. So desperate for love that she'd mistaken possession for devotion. So insecure that she tried to earn affection through self-sacrifice. That girl would never have been able to appreciate a love like this, one that celebrated her independence rather than trying to diminish it. The graduation ceremony was a triumph. Violet graduated summa cum laude with a portfolio that had already attracted attention from several prestigious graduate programs. Leo graduated with honors and multiple job offers from top environmental firms. As they celebrated with friends and family afterward, Violet felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She'd been given the rarest of gifts, a genuine second chance, and she'd used it to build something beautiful. I'm so proud of you both, Violet's mother said, pulling her and Leo into a group hug. You've built something really special together. We have, Violet agreed, looking at Leo with all the love and appreciation she felt. We really have. Later that evening, as they walked across campus one last time as students, Violet's phone buzzed with a message notification. She was surprised to see it was from Aiden. "Congratulations on your graduation and your engagement." The message read, "I saw the announcement in the alumni newsletter. You both look incredibly happy. And you deserve all the joy in the world. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. Even when I was too immature to understand it at the time." Violet showed the message to Leo, who smiled warmly. "That's nice of him to reach out." "It is." Violet agreed. She typed back a simple response. "Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad you've found your path. Wishing you all the best. V." As they continued their walk, Violet reflected on how completely her life had changed from her first time around. In her previous life, she'd graduated alone and heartbroken, having sacrificed her academic potential for an obsessive love that was never returned. She'd had no clear direction, no sense of her own worth, no understanding of what healthy love could look like. Now she was surrounded by love, from Leo, from her family, from friends who valued her for who she truly was. She had artistic recognition, academic achievements, and most importantly, a deep sense of self-worth that no external validation could shake. "Any regrets?" Leo asked, echoing a question he'd posed years earlier. Violet considered it seriously, as she always did. "About my past? No. About the choices I've made since? Absolutely not. Everything led me here, to this moment, to you. I wouldn't change any of it. Even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts." Violet replied firmly. "Pain taught me what I didn't want. It showed me the difference between love and obsession, between partnership and possession. Without understanding what felt wrong, I never would have recognized what felt right." As they reached Leo's car, Violet took one last look at the campus that had been home for 4 years. This place had witnessed her transformation from a girl running from her past to a woman confidently building her future. It had been the setting for countless moments of growth, discovery, and deepening love. "Ready for the next adventure?" Leo asked, opening her car door with the gentlemanly gesture that had become such a natural part of their relationship. "More than ready," Violet replied, settling into the passenger seat. As they drove away from campus toward their new life together, Violet thought about the young woman she'd been when she first arrived at university, still healing from the trauma of her previous life, still learning to trust her own judgment, still discovering what she was capable of when she wasn't trying to be someone else's salvation. That girl had been brave enough to start over, wise enough to make different choices, and strong enough to build something better from the ashes of her former life. She'd learned to love herself first, which had made it possible to love others in a healthy way. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and promise. Graduate school, career development, travel, maybe marriage and children someday when they were ready. All of it felt attainable because it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership. Most importantly, Violet knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as her authentic self, not as someone trying to earn love through sacrifice, but as someone who understood her own worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. Copy Epilogue, the woman she became 5 years later. Violet stood in her own art studio, putting the finishing touches on a painting that would be featured in her first solo exhibition in New York. The piece depicted a phoenix rising from ashes, but instead of the traditional flames, the bird emerged from a swirl of cherry blossoms and morning light. Leo entered the studio carrying 2 cups of coffee, a ritual that had become sacred in their shared morning routine. They'd been married for 6 months, having waited until they were both established in their careers before taking that next step. "How's it coming?" he asked, setting her coffee on the table beside her easel. "I think it's finished," Violet replied, stepping back to examine her work with a critical eye. "What do you think?" Leo studied the painting thoughtfully. "It's powerful," he said finally. "There's something about the way the light hits the bird's wings. It looks like hope made visible." "That's exactly what I was going for." Violet smiled, leaning into his warmth as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "The opening is next week, right?" Leo asked. "I've already blocked out the time on my calendar. Wouldn't miss it for the world." "I know you wouldn't," Violet replied, feeling that familiar surge of gratitude for having a partner who celebrated her successes as enthusiastically as his own. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she was surprised to see it was from an unknown number. When she opened it, though, the message made her smile. "I saw the announcement about your New York exhibition in the art magazine my assistant subscribes to. I wanted you to know how proud I am of your success. You've become exactly who you were always meant to be. Aiden." Attached was a photo of what appeared to be a community center, with a small plaque beside the entrance that read D. The Violet Chen Memorial Arts Program, providing creative opportunities for underserved youth. Violet stared at the image in amazement. He named an arts program after me, she said, showing Leo the message. That's incredible, Leo replied, reading over her shoulder. What a beautiful way to honor the impact you had on his life. I need to respond to this, Violet said, typing carefully. Aiden, I'm deeply touched by this tribute. Creating opportunities for young artists to discover their talents is one of the most meaningful gifts you could give. Thank you for turning our complicated past into something beautiful for others. I'm proud of the man you've become. Violet. As she sent the message, Violet reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. In her previous life, she died believing that her love for Aiden had been wasted, that her sacrifice had meant nothing. Now she could see that even their painful dynamic had served a purpose. It had taught them both invaluable lessons about love, respect, and personal growth. Her phone buzzed again with Aiden's reply. The program has already helped over 100 kids discover their artistic talents. Your influence reaches farther than you know. Thank you for teaching me what real love looks like, even when I was too broken to understand it. Violet showed the message to Leo, who smiled warmly. I love that your story has a happy ending for everyone involved, he said. Even the parts that seemed like pure heartbreak at the time led to something meaningful. That's the thing about second chances, Violet mused, settling into the comfortable chair by the studio window. They're not just about fixing your own mistakes. Sometimes they're about creating ripple effects that help other people fix theirs too. Leo joined her by the window, where they could see the cherry trees in their neighborhood beginning to bloom. 4 years had passed since that first spring of her rebirth, and each season brought new layers of healing and growth. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices? Leo asked gently. If you'd given Aiden another chance in high school, or if you'd never met me? Violet considered the question seriously, as she always did when contemplating the profound gift of her second life. Sometimes, she admitted. But then I remember that those alternate timelines wouldn't have been built on the foundation of self, knowledge and healing that this one has. Whatever happiness we might have found would have been shallower, more fragile. She took Leo's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The pain of my first life taught me what I needed to learn. The choices I made in this one brought me everything I never knew I wanted. I can't regret any of it. Even dying, Leo asked softly. It was a question he'd never asked before, though Violet knew he'd wondered about the mysterious transformation she'd undergone during senior year of high school. Violet had never told him about her rebirth. How could she explain something so impossible? But over the years, she'd shared enough about her difficult past and personal growth journey that he understood she'd overcome significant trauma to become the woman he'd fallen in love with. Even dying, she confirmed, because it wasn't really death, it was metamorphosis. Like a caterpillar entering a chrysalis. I had to completely dissolve who I thought I was in order to become who I was meant to be. Leo squeezed her hand, understanding more than he could possibly know. Well, I'm grateful for whatever journey brought you to me. And I'm excited to see what we build together going forward. As if summoned by their conversation about the future, Violet's phone rang. The caller ID showed her literary agent's name, and Violet's heart skipped with anticipation. She'd been working on a novel loosely based on her experiences, a story about second chances, personal growth, and the difference between obsessive love and healthy partnership. Violet. Her agent's voice bubbled with excitement. I have incredible news. 3 publishers want to bid on your novel. The early feedback is extraordinary. Readers are calling it transformative, healing, a story that could help people recognize unhealthy relationship patterns before they become destructive. Violet felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. Really? Really? One editor said it's the most insightful exploration of love versus obsession she's ever read. Another said it could save people from years of therapy by helping them understand these concepts through story. After hanging up, Violet sat in stunned silence for a moment. Her art was reaching people. Her story, both the pain and the healing, was going to help others navigate their own relationship challenges. Good news? Leo asked, though her expression had already given away the answer. The best news. Violet replied, pulling him into a celebratory hug. My book is going to be published. My story is going to help people. Of course it is. Leo said, spinning her around the studio. You've lived through the darkness and found your way to the light. Who better to guide other people along that same path? That evening, they celebrated at their favorite restaurant, the same little place where they'd had their first official date years earlier. As they shared dessert and talked about their dreams for the future, Violet marveled at how different this life felt from her previous one. In her first life, every moment had been tinged with anxiety, with the desperate need to prove herself worthy of love. In this life, love felt abundant and secure, a renewable resource that grew stronger with sharing rather than being depleted by it. "I want to tell you something," Violet said as they walked home through the tree-lined streets of their neighborhood. "Something I've never told anyone." Leo looked at her with gentle curiosity. "What is it?" "Sometimes I have dreams that feel more like memories. Dreams of a different life, where I made different choices and ended up in a very different place." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "In these dreams, I loved someone who couldn't love me back the way I deserved. I gave up everything for that person, and it destroyed me." Leo was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. "Do you think those dreams are warnings? Your subconscious telling you what could have been?" "Maybe," Violet replied. "Or maybe they're reminders. Reminders of why the choices I've made in this life are so important. Why choosing yourself first isn't selfish, it's necessary for building anything healthy with another person." "Well," Leo said, stopping to face her under a streetlight surrounded by falling cherry blossoms, "I'm grateful for whatever dreams or experiences or instincts led you to choose this path, because this path led you to me, and me to you." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Violet. Not the version of you that you think I want to see, not some idealized fantasy of who you could become, but exactly who you are right now in this moment. Your strength, your wisdom, your art, your scars, your healing, all of it. I love you too," Violet whispered back. "More than I ever thought possible." As they kissed under the blooming trees, Violet felt a profound sense of completion wash over her. This was what she'd been searching for all along, not the desperate, consuming fire of obsession, but the steady, warming flame of true partnership. Her phone buzzed one final time that evening. Another message from an unknown number, but when she read it, she realized it was from someone she'd never expected to hear from again. "Violet, this is Serena. I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out after reading an advance copy of your novel. My therapist recommended it. Apparently it's making waves in psychology circles already. I owe you an apology for my behavior in college and high school. Reading your book helped me understand that I was trying to possess love instead of nurture it. I'm working on becoming a better person, and I wanted you to know that your story is helping me get there. Thank you for sharing your truth so courageously." Violet showed the message to Leo, who read it with raised eyebrows. "Wow. Your book isn't even published yet and it's already changing lives. I guess that's what happens when you write from a place of authentic healing rather than just entertainment." Violet mused. Real transformation resonates with people who are ready for their own growth. As they settled into bed that night, Leo reading an environmental policy report while Violet sketched ideas for her next painting, she reflected on the interconnected web of healing that had emerged from her second chance. Aiden had become a champion for underprivileged youth, channeling his privilege into meaningful service. Serena was apparently working on her own personal growth with professional help. Violet's book would soon help countless readers distinguish between healthy and unhealthy love patterns. And she and Leo continued building a relationship that modeled what mutual respect and genuine partnership could look like. "You know what I realized today?" Violet said, setting down her sketchbook and turning to face Leo. "What's that?" "This isn't really a story about revenge at all. It's a story about redemption, for everyone involved. The best revenge against people who hurt you isn't hurting them back. It's healing yourself so completely that their actions lose the power to define you." Leo smiled, closing his report and giving her his full attention, and then using that healing to help other people find their own way forward. "Exactly," Violet agreed. "It's about breaking cycles instead of perpetuating them." As she drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by love and purpose and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, Violet whispered a prayer of gratitude to whatever force had given her this miraculous second chance. She'd taken the gift of rebirth and transformed it into something beautiful. Not just for herself, but for everyone whose life had been touched by her story. She'd learned that true strength wasn't about enduring suffering, but about choosing growth. That real love wasn't about losing yourself in another person, but about becoming so whole that you could share your fullness freely. Most importantly, she'd discovered that the greatest victories weren't won by defeating others, but by becoming the best version of yourself and inspiring others to do the same. In her dreams that night, Violet saw herself as an old woman, surrounded by children and grandchildren, her walls covered with paintings that told stories of hope and transformation. Leo was beside her, his hair silver but his eyes still bright with the same gentle wisdom that had first drawn her to him. And in the corner of her dream studio hung a small photograph of a young man at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new community arts center. Aiden, decades older but wearing the genuine smile of someone who had found his purpose in service to others. Some love stories, Violet realized, weren't meant to end with the lovers together. Some were meant to end with everyone becoming better people. Because of what they'd shared, even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts. Her second chance had taught her that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the refusal to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes loving someone means walking away, and sometimes the most beautiful endings are the ones where everyone wins, just not in the way anyone originally expected. As the cherry blossoms outside her window rustled in the night breeze, Violet smiled in her sleep. She had loved deeply, chosen wisely, and built something lasting. She had transformed pain into purpose, mistakes into wisdom, and heartbreak into hope. She had lived well. And that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all. Thank you so much for joining me on Violet's incredible journey of self-discovery, growth, and redemption. Her story shows us that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well, choosing yourself, building healthy relationships, and using your experiences to help others heal. What resonated most with you about Violet's transformation? Have you ever had to choose between what felt familiar and what was actually good for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart and made you think about love, second chances, and personal growth in new ways, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share your own experiences or insights in the comments. This community thrives on our shared stories and wisdom. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of transformation, love, and the courage to choose yourself. Your support means everything to me and helps me continue bringing you stories that inspire and heal. Remember, you are worthy of a love that celebrates you, not one that diminishes you. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not desperate need. And you always have the power to choose yourself and start again. Until next time, keep choosing growth, keep choosing love, and keep choosing yourself. You're worth it.